From bringing the first major UFC event to Perth after 6 years, to making Dana White sign a 3-event agreement with the government of New South Wales. Here's how Alex Volkanovski brought the UFC to Australia.
What's up, Australia? UFC President Dana White here. The UFC is coming back. We just did a deal with New South Wales government, which will bring 3 pay-per-view events to Sydney over the next 4 years.
It's been ages since the UFC made its way to Sydney. I'm talking way back in 2017. The fans down under were craving some UFC action, and the main event at Fight Night 121 was about to go down, with Fabricio Werdum, aka a heavyweight force, at the center of it. And he did his thing and bulldozed through Marcin Tybura. He put on an intense performance, and it was a wild ride for a fight night. And the most recent UFC event Australia's had, with their last pay-per-view match taking place in Sydney way back at UFC 127 in 2011. Let me set the scene for you. Enter Kyle Noke, a true Aussie warrior who was ready to make his mark on home soil. He was facing off against his former UFC buddy Chris Camozzi and wasted no time. He swiftly took Camozzi down to the mat, and that's where the fight stayed. Noke moved with grace, passing Camozzi's defense with zero effort. And then, Noke wrapped his arms around Camozzi's neck, sinking in a rear naked choke. Camozzi had no choice but to tap out and was defeated by the hometown hero. These were the last UFC fights Australia saw, but that's changing, and they owe it all to Alex the Great. It all went down back in February 2023, when Perth became the center of the UFC universe. Picture this: the UFC lightweight champ Islam Makhachev putting his shiny title on the line against Australia's very own featherweight champion and local legend, Alexander Volkanovski. It was a champion versus champion showdown, and Makhachev's first time defending his belt, ever since he won it from Charles Oliveira in October 2022. So you could tell the stakes were high. The Aussie UFC fans knew this, and they were absolutely on fire in that arena. When those fighters made their walk to the octagon in front of the crowd, it wasn't just noise hitting their ears. It was a feeling that went right down into their bones. Australian MMA fighter Jimmy Crute summed it up perfectly and said that when you make that walk in front of Aussie fans, you don't just hear it, you can feel it. Crute trained with Volkanovski in the past, and he said he had full faith in his mate's power. He was confident that Volk would come out on top against Makhachev, especially with the absence of Makhachev's training partner and UFC legend, Khabib Nurmagomedov. According to Crute, Volkanovski had the style and the skills to cause an upset and shock the world, and a lot of Aussie fans shared that opinion and had no doubt that their local legend would come out on top during the iconic matchup. But unfortunately, Alex couldn't win, and the match still remains one of the UFC's most controversial fights. Let me take you to the moment the action took place, when the crowd was pumped up during Volk's entrance, ready to see their hometown hero fight his heart out. But when Makhachev made his way to the octagon, the crowd kept booing non-stop. You could really tell whose side they were on that night. Right from the start, both fighters came out swinging, and Volk started the action by landing a massive punch that had Makhachev stumbling backward. It was a close call, but the round ended before Makhachev could lock in a submission, and Volk came out strong in the second round, landing another huge blow, which dropped Makhachev to the ground. Volkanovski then unleashed a barrage of strikes until the pace slowed down in the third round, with both fighters starting to get more cautious. Alex got back up every time Islam managed to take him down, and as the round went on, the crowd's excitement grew louder, especially when Volkanovski's technical striking started to find its mark. And in the final 30 seconds of the fourth round, a pumped-up Volkanovski threw blind punches that landed right on Islam's face, and heading into the fifth and final round, everyone was on their feet, giving the fighters a standing ovation. Makhachev landed a solid punch that caused a cut on Volkanovski's face. However, the Aussie warrior didn't back down and escaped another takedown attempt, and with around 4 minutes left on the clock, Volk rocked Makhachev with a massive punch once again that sent him crashing to the canvas. The crowd went crazy with excitement as Alex kept going with the ground and pound, but when it came time for the judge's decision, it wasn't in the Aussies' favor. Makhachev's name was announced, and the boos started to rain down. It was a tough moment for all the locals who tuned into the match, but they still sent Volk a lot of love after the fight. It was a robbery in plain sight. Fans were blown away by Volk's performance. In fact, they said that if anyone watched that fight and wasn't amazed, they've got to question their fight IQ. Before this bout, Charles Oliveira, Islam's previous opponent, landed a solid number of strikes on Makhachev. But guess what? Volk completely outdid him. He not only topped Charles in significant strikes, but he also unleashed a barrage of total ones, 70 to be exact. And while he was going beast mode in that ring, Islam could only manage 54 in return, and it doesn't stop there. Volk sent out a total of 164 strikes, leaving Makhachev in the dust with a poor 95. Volk's defense was on point too, so fans were mad. They said Alex put on an absolute show. So why did he get the short end of the stick when the judges' decisions were announced? You could feel the collective disappointment in the air with Islam's win, and fans were wondering if the judges tuned into the wrong match. Volk completely outperformed Islam, and believe me when I say that Volk exceeded every expectation the MMA experts had for him. It was a no-brainer for many fans that Volk deserved the win, but he got robbed of that title instead. Either way, the Perth crowd still took this fight to a whole new level of excitement because it was so personal to their town. The energy was felt throughout the arena from start to finish, and every shift in momentum was met with loud cheers. And that fight even began the conversation for the 2023 Fight of the Year. Fans said Alex's hype brought the whole excitement into play, and the UFC needs to make good use of it and give the Aussie fans more of what they want, which is more UFC events in the future. They probably thought it'd be a while before they get those, but because of Alex, the next fight is coming to Australia sooner than they think at UFC 293. And you might be wondering, what has Volk done to impress the UFC? So much so that they're bringing events to Australia after years of drought. Thing is, Alex, with his mind-blowing 25-2 record, is already making a name for himself as one of the most dominant featherweight champions in UFC history. He's been rocking the octagon like nobody's business, and now on July 8th, he's gearing up for a fight that could take his legacy to new heights. His fight against Makhachev got people talking because of how controversial it was. But now Volk's got the golden opportunity to show the world just how good he can get. This time, he's up against the interim featherweight champion himself, Yair Rodriguez. And let me tell you, Volkanovski is a true workhorse in this industry. The guy doesn't mess around, and when he steps into that octagon with Rodriguez, it'll be his fourth fight in just 15 months. And if he manages to take down Rodriguez, a fighter who's known as one of the most dangerous ones in the division with his multi-style skills, it'll be a huge achievement for Volk, because word on the street is that if he defeats Yair, a rematch against Makhachev will be confirmed. And it might just happen in Australia again, because everyone who watched that fight, even Dana White, believed that Alex won the first bout. Yes, the president of the UFC himself has his eyes on Volk. He confirmed that the upcoming pay-per-view is going to go down in Sydney, and it's going to be a fight between Israel Adesanya and the winner of the clash between Aussie fan favorite Robert Whittaker and the rising star Dricus du Plessis. Max Holloway himself spilled the beans right after his recent victory, mentioning that there's a fight coming up in his agent's country, Australia, but he wasn't sure about the exact date before Dana ended up confirming it and told everyone it's going to go down on September 10th. But that's not all. Dana dropped another bombshell and said that the UFC has signed a sweet deal with the government of New South Wales, saying they're going to host not just one, but 3 pay-per-view events in Sydney over the next 4 years because of how successful that Volk fight went. Australian UFC fans are in for a treat, because you know who could potentially be featured on the Sydney card? Tai Tuivasa against the man himself, Alexander the Great. So from making Dana White sign a 3-event agreement with the New South Wales government to bringing back the first major UFC event to Perth after 6 years, this was how Alex Volkanovski brought the UFC to Australia.